Well, I saw a ship a sailing on the sea, and oh, it was laden with pretty things for thee, comforts in the cabin, and apples in the hold. The sails were made of silk, and the masts were made of gold. 4 and 20 sailors sat upon the deck. There were 4 and 20 whitepies with chains about their necks. The captain was a duck, and the ship began to sail. The captain cried, "Quack, quack." I think I fudged the ending on that. That was one of the first memorized poems that I had my son memorize. I think he was about 4 or 5. And I used to read it to him before bed. I was just going through some books, boxes and boxes of books I have of the children's books, most of which I'd say were from their grandmother King, who was a teacher for 35 years and understood the value of reading and cared enough to write in each and every book a dedication, as she had a fondness for, of not only the children but for keeping a record of the years as they pass by, as grandparents do. And it struck me too, the instantaneous memories of the stages of the children as they were learning things, and their exuberance for such repetitive and that's not the right word that I'm searching for, but the routine of reading before bed and hearing their father or mother's voice, mostly their father's, and it's amazing what two provincial BC judges have done here to a family, you know, whose history is like any family, long and valued and part of the communities in which they uh, resided, and the damage caused by uh, an afternoon hearing or a 15-minute hearing, of ex parte without the opportunity for the other party to be there after 9 years of litigation. Um, you ask yourself all of the the questions: who, Joanne Challenger, Gordon Witherell, why, for their banner phrase, the interests of the children, and that's not in the interest at all. When you take away a father, as it's been studied, by the top tier universities, I'm speaking of Harvard, Yale, just to name a couple that I know of, and studies that I've read, um, specifically relating to the scientific reaction to children. Their neurons, all of the instincts that fire when you displace them and take them and keep them from their parents, the regressive impact that it has on language, on senses. This is the most malevolent thing, and which is malicious and is a form of domestic terrorism and violence. And the MCFD, which is of course just simply a monopolized version of government agenda, has been a terror to First Nations families and to non-First Nations families. And in that regard, I know firsthand of having a ruling which breaks a consent order of two parents for equal shared parenting, the basis of which is an unregulated social worker with barely a degree, who was, as they all are, biased towards the mother because the funding runs that way. And of course, the court's looking for an easy answer to high conflict litigation, which is no end. And, rules are broken flagrantly by judiciary. And they don't answer to anyone because of the impunity. And I think it's time that we take that impunity from them as they've taken our children. And we punish those who are responsible for such misdeeds in a legal fashion and we set precedents. And so legislation, I can understand completely the need for this type of legislation. We have currently in Canada a court system which is seeking absolute power, and essentially has that. And look at the result of some of the rulings in the last year alone, and look at what's being done to our education system in the hands of these biased tribunals, and under the auspices of the woke, and so it's easily discernible to see, actions being taken elsewhere which limit the powers of the court. And certainly we should review ours. I read Conrad Black's piece in the National Post several months ago on this very subject. And I don't always agree with what the National Post writers have to say. However, I believe that the level of writing and the level of argument for and against was well stated. And what is child abuse in Canada? It is so misandric and leveled at males when we have women across the country abusing men's reproductive rights by A, not telling them their fathers, B, withholding children using family and all other types of APATHs, people who aid and abet in the breaking of family court orders and the criminal code. And then we have, of course, a police force which is complicit in all of the above and has its own agenda, and certainly a bias that is, historically in favor of women. And now we have women that are mostly in positions of power. I've talked about this before. So, at the risk of repeating myself, I want to take it to the point where, how does a judge who has never had children themselves, the experience of, and even connect with what they are doing? And, ignorance is no defense in law, and it shouldn't be in the ruling of law either. And there should not be a, on high ability for these ignorant judges to make rulings which affect the lives of generations of Canadians. And they go off to their golf clubs and their, barrister's lounge, and, they drive out the wrong way in the parkade. Rules are for fools, And so this is an elite group which runs amok in our society with total impunity. And many have, issues which recently have come to light, and which stem from, infirmity to alcoholism, and, sexual gender identity crisis, the whole 9 yards. They need to be vetted and reviewed on a regular basis. And the current judicial review system is inadequate to investigate itself. And the reform is needed in that area tremendously. Because if you file a complaint in Canada about any agency which has power over you, it's just a feedback loop. You won't get anywhere. It's only the precedent cases and the cases that the media are going to shed light on potentially that will return And right now we have, an FN uh, focus, and they have been incredibly able to litigate, but they've been doing it for decades and generations. And their money is reinvested in Bay Street lawyers and firms, and we could take a page from them, and the women's suffragette movement, because what has to happen in North America is we have to have a parity, not in wages, that's, child's play, but in reproductive rights. And I'm speaking, of course, of male reproductive rights, which are not enshrined in the legislation that we now have. And so a new paradigm must happen, a new contract between men and women. If we're going to not rid ourselves of this absolute atrocity of family court, it's a laughing stock, and it's antiquated and archaic and arcane. No one understands it, not even the judiciary themselves, and nor do they follow the rules, as I've stated. How don't they follow the rules? Well, just to give a couple examples, when you allow a 6-year-old to pack their knapsack with a desk divorce and you send them on a Sunday morning to greet their grandmother and father at a parenting exchange, that child is carrying a bomb that they will carry with them the rest of their life. And, a disturbed woman had put an affidavit in the bottom of a present box for the children at Christmas time, with the hopes that it would expire and be opened on Christmas morning. And once the stuffies, as they refer to here, stuffed animals, are removed from the box with the wrapping paper and the card, on the bottom is a gift for their father, an affidavit for a custody grab. So, that was rejected soundly, thank God. But in the hands of a less informed judge, as the one in North Vancouver, it clearly is, that could have passed muster. So what are we to think of these people? What kind of good can come? As many professionals have said, both in the medical field and the science, these are not colleagues, but long standing friends in many cases, and professionals in, very good positions across the country. And, it's astounding. No one can understand the logic in this case. This, King versus Berglund has got to be one of the worst child custody cases in the history of Canada. And to not see your children and have them withheld against the orders without any repercussions for the other side it's nothing short of astounding. The damage done to my daughter, for instance, just since last year, where she was used to being at least shuttled over part way, halfway, as the order stated, to the island. As she used to say, it reminded her of having a cottage. Unfortunately, to go from 50-50 to that is a crime in itself. And what is my supposed behavior, which has some sort of reason behind this? Is it that I moved to Vancouver Island from North Vancouver after being harassed by the MCFD, the RCMP, the SD44? It was just a rotating roster at the door. Are your children alive, Mr. King? Can we come in and put our flashlights on their bunk beds? Well, I'd prefer you didn't. And then, the ongoing dialogue that police do at the door, these situations, it's really sinister, and it's only done to men. And so, that needs to change, doesn't it? And, I'm thinking of some people who have made strides in that area. Of recent note, certainly Jordan Peterson and Greg Ellis's interview is one of considerable note and interest, and his show, The Respondent, and publication. Uh, you know, um, there are so many people who've gone through this, and yet it's still hard for the public to understand, because having your children taken away, well, what could you equate that with? Well, you could equate it with the Ukrainian-Russian war, and the circumstance where the Russians have taken the Ukrainian children for only about a year. And I say only because I've had mine taken for almost 4.5, going on 5 years. I've been in divorce trench court for for almost a decade, rather. That's longer than the First and Second World War combined. So, it's insane. It's insane. And usually these courts, they make massive amounts of money in this period. They made nothing from me, and they won't. And the fact is that this is how they operate, and they need to stop operating that way. We need to take away, adversarial litigation in this country and replace it with mediation, which is funded for lower income households. And, I had a background in the arts and teaching, but we were not dependent, as I said to this judge, Joanne Challenger, we were not dependent on the government for anything beyond the regular UCCB credit. We both worked. Yet, all goes to the wayside when the female needs to play the victim card so that they can have full benefit of, I was going to say numerous resources, but there's limitless resources for women, and there's zero for men. So there is an inequity to start with. If Trudeau wants to have a level hand, he should go back into his, chocolate box and look at the fine print of, of the vast majority of Canadians in the court system since the First World War have lost their children to an inequitable and unjust family court system. It's only the small, group of people who have managed to get out of a high conflict divorce with their children, and intact. So, these two judges that I speak of should recuse themselves. They have conflicts of interest. Justice Witherall served as a judicial person in the conference, the first conference, the JCC. They're not supposed to make further rulings in lieu of a trial that decides custody. They're biased, 100%. I wrote Christopher Hinkson, the Chief Justice, and I was by registered mail. I was told, sent back a practice direction as to how to address the court. However, my queries were in the summer of July 22 of 2022, and this is April 2023. The years go by and nothing gets accomplished. We've had 2 to 3 years of COVID. Certainly the court system's, guilty of taking, extreme precautions and railroading even the backlog of former, litigation years down the road. So where's the budget for that? Obviously in the Supreme Court, it falls to the federal government, and the provincial court. Legal aid is absolutely abysmal for men. It's always been the case, but it's even worse now than it ever was before. So anyway, I can't go on, but as usual, it's an impromptu speech that I give, and I thank you for tuning in, and wish you well.